I love that in our opening worship song we sang of the healing art of laughter. And so even though today has been a rough day and a rough week for many of us, we still will sense the presence of God who is with us, bubbling up with truth and life in this beautiful resurrection story. For those of you who follow my adventures on Facebook and Instagram, not Twitter so much, I'm more of an Instagram kind of gal, you know I was on vacation last week. I called it my from coffee to wine vacation. Begin the day with good coffee, stuff happened in the middle, and then end the day with a little bit of California wine, not too much, but enjoying it, savoring it. It was restful and rejuvenating, which I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that I can take vacations. It's a beautiful gift, a wonderful thing. I was in Northern California. A lot of you asked if I saw my family, and I did in a way, right, in a way. I'm not from Northern California, but I went to college at UC Santa Cruz. Go banana slugs. No one? No one else? No banana slugs in the house? I thought we had a few. It's okay. Yeah, you can tell we had a mascot for a football team. No football team. It's below San Francisco, and my closest friend at the time, who I've talked to in this setting before, Peter, went to UC Berkeley. He was the fancier of us. So during my college years, I spent a good amount of time in the South Bay of San Francisco and in the city itself. And so I love the city. I've led mission trips to what's called the Tenderloin of San Francisco. I've taken youth groups up to show them the disparity in the city, right? It's a complex place, San Francisco, right? It's complex. I am someone who loves the fog, right? And for those of you who are on Twitter, you should follow an account called Carl the Fog. It is the fog of San Francisco. I kid you not. It's a Twitter account, and it's so funny to listen to. One of them that I read online was on 4th of July. It said, "Oh, you want to see the fireworks?" No, I'm the fog. I'm keeping that all hidden. Of course, as you know, I'm from LA, but I remember going to, and LA's kind of a fast-paced kind of city, and so I remember my first day in college driving through near one of the coffee shops in downtown, and there was a sign out front that said, "Slow down. The journey is as important as the destination." And I was like, oh, what fresh hell is this? What is going on? Northern California, in many ways, should be bifurcated from Southern California. How many agree with me? Two separate states. So I visited different sets of friends when I was in that area. One couple I've known for 25 years. This was the first part of my trip. I spoke about them a little bit at Pulse on Wednesday. Those are what I call my gold friends. So those of you who are in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, make new friends and keep the old. One is and the other's gold. Those are my gold friends. That's fun, I like it. I also, because I bought Girl Scout cookies, because there were some Girl Scouts, actually it was candy. I didn't know the Girl Scouts sold candy. Does anyone know that? They sell they sell a lot of things, right? And they were outside of one of the wineries, and I thought that was the smartest move they ever made. So I didn't just remember the song because they were my gold friends. I bought some candy at the winery. The second was a newer group of friends, two female pastoral colleagues who are senior ministers of large, historic UCC churches. They are awesome. I realized it was sort of essential for my health to have input from colleagues outside of the church here, and God truly brought these women into my life. You all support us going to General Synod, and I want to thank you for that. That's how we make beautiful connections that give us life and help us out. So thank you. One of them is a senior minister of the big UCC church at Berkeley, and so she invited Heather and I, her name is Molly, to her home. And I was sort of laughing at the time because I thought, we could be like Stabby Joes. Like, she doesn't know. We just sort of met briefly at General Synod, but she invited us into our home. We went wine tasting. We ate awesome food. We had such life-giving conversations about pastoral ministry. It truly revived my soul. And again, thank you that I work at a place that gives me a vacation. The second day we were there, we decided to visit the historical Muir Woods, right? And that is when you get to know new friends, right? With traveling, right? Has anyone ever traveled with people and you get to know them a little bit more? What kind of travelers they are? So I had envisioned us hiking around maybe the gift shop, right? the tree that was closest, taking an Instagram picture. You know it was going to happen. Hashtag near woods, right? No. These are actually hiking ladies. One had a fanny pack. One had a backpack filled with snacks and water bottles, not the plastic kind at San Francisco, everyone. They were usable. And so they would pull these things out, and I was just there with my hiking boots. You know what I mean? They're like cute, but not super functional. More for the Instagram picture, not really for hiking. So we began the short hike. She's like, we'll go the short way. I was like, okay. And this is, again, when you get to know your friends. It went up and up and up and up and up. And at one point, I said to no one in particular, but out loud, does it ever stop going up? Now, it isn't that I'm out of shape. It's more that I wasn't really prepared mentally to work out that day. You see, when I go to the gym, and if you follow me, you know I go to Orange Theory Fitness. I go 3 or 4 times a week. But when I go, I know what I'm getting into, right? I dress for it. I put my hair in a ponytail. I know there will be pain and sweat and probably tears. Like I mentally prepare for it. I have to gear myself up. For those of you who work out or don't work out, it's a mental game, right? Would you agree? So I was not mentally prepared for this long hike that we were getting on. Again, I had dressed more for gift shop and later wine tasting in Sausalito, but we kept going. So we took the short path, but what was interesting is when we got to a point in the short path where the sign said gift shop this way, which, you know, for me it was like, thank God, there's coffee there, right, or whatever. And we get to the sign, there's also a sign that says under construction. How is a forest under construction? I'm still not sure. I'm like, are we in Dallas? Like, are we back in Dallas? Like, what's happening? Everything's under construction. And so, of course, like they're like, oh, we'll go the other way. I'm like, no, we'll talk to someone. So guy, hard hat guy, so what is going on here? And he's like, oh, we're bolstering up some of the trees, so there's these lines up. They may fall and hit you, so we don't want you to walk through here. And I said, can I sign a waiver and like take my chances? Please. It says gift shop this way. And he's like, no, and he didn't say no. He ignored me, and he should have. It was a silly question. So mentally, I was like, really? But we did end up making it to the end. It was funny because when we were leaving the gift shop going that way, and we were going the other way to get to the gift shop, right, the other way around, Molly was like, oh, it's just up there. And I look, and there's like people walking on this trail, like way far up there. And I'm like, you're not helping, Molly. You're not helping. You should not have told me this. So we walk up the trail, and just as I begin to sort of complain that I'm not really dressed for this long hike that was a short hike, I look over in the other part of the trail, and I'm not kidding you not, there were nuns in full habits. And so I zipped it. I was like, I'm okay. I'm okay. And then I was like, are there hiking Jesus shoes? Like I was curious. I wanted to see. Anyway, they were showing off, those Jesus people. Anyway, as I was hiking, I began to notice this pattern in the trees. I would walk and see this huge tree. I mean girthy, not just like tall, but really big around. Okay, shh. Don't let your mind go there. Don't let your mind go there, okay? It was big, and as you would get closer, you would notice that it actually wasn't one big tree, but it was several trees growing upwards together. Has anyone ever seen this phenomenon? So it's a bunch of trees kind of growing in together, supporting each other, surrounding each other, bolstering each other up. And I found out that when a tree is stressed or hurt from maybe a fire or strong wind or humans, right? Something called the burl, you're welcome. I know the burl is odd, will send up new sprouts. So if you've ever seen a bulge on a tree that has a new growth, that's a burl. It means that sometime along the way, the tree has been harmed, right? So if you see a tree with like a weird outgrowth, there has been trauma, which I think is a whole other sermon of itself. I would call it, be gentle with my bulges, right? But when a tree has been traumatized from the roots, deep down, from the foundation, the burls grow up right around the tree, and they in fact look like separate trees or different trees. These new trees grow close together and in circles sprouting from the burls of the roots. These are called family circles. right? Isn't that beautiful? They're called family circles. And to me, that is such a beautiful picture of not only what we are honoring this week, but what we are reading this day, thank you, Mac, about resurrection. What does it mean to live a life that is truly life in resurrection form? So often, again, when you see a large tree that is surrounded by this new kind of growth or newer trees, again, trauma has occurred, and that new growth rises up in the midst of trauma or pain. That'll preach. Are you hearing it? Rises up in the midst. New life is found surrounding the old. New life supporting. New life keeping it safe. And I think that is what the church is supposed to be, right? The community of followers of the way of Jesus, right? We are to be those who surround the wounded, the traumatized, the mourning, and the struggling. And some of us are mourning this day. And we are to be people who support and encourage new growth and new life in the midst of all of our difficulties. Today's text is probably familiar to you. It is another resurrection story in the Gospels. I love when you sort of encounter another resurrection story and you think, oh, okay, this is new. We thought maybe there was one, right? This is a fascinating story that is heard of a lot, the story of Lazarus. Did you know the word Lazarus comes from the Hebrew word Eliezer? Lazarus is believed to be the Galilean pronunciation of that word, indicating that Lazarus and his family were probably Galileans. To be a Galilean in the fourth gospel was not determined solely by geography. Remember, we're in the Gospel of John, right? What have I said about the Gospel of John? The Gospel of John, night is not necessarily night, but it's supposed to invoke something in us. The Gospel of John gives us imagery to find our way into the God of beauty. Anytime someone asks me, what gospel should I start with if they're a new Christian, and if they are a singer or a poet or an artist, I always send them to the book of John. John gives us wings to experience the God who we love more beautifully. And so here we get, in the midst of John, some scholars would say that there is this argument in the book of John between the Judean and Galilean worldview, right? To have a particular mindset and to clash and think through what does it mean to live fully into the way of Jesus. The Judean worldview represents that of strength and power and empire, right? That who bolsters up those systems around us. The Galilean point of view is the new realm that Jesus talks about, where he calls values into question, values like equality and mercy and justice and new life, right? Resurrection life. The fourth gospel uses two words for life in the passages that surround this. One has its etymology in the term bios, right? Bios means physical life, right? Biology, that's where we get biology. It means to survive and conquer. It means to live the physical life, the current way of life that we are living. The empire life is bios life. Bios life dies. Bios life fades away. Bios life is not everlasting. But there's another term used for life in this passage by Jesus himself, and the term is Zoe. You may have heard of it. People name their children that. I love it. And it is more akin to saved life. God's life, with both inner and a sort of mystical, intangible element and an outward connection to the source of holy and divine life itself. Zoe life is what Jesus came to exemplify and pass on to us according to the fourth gospel. And earlier in this chapter, when Jesus is doing this whole entire encounter, we get the famous phrase that we use a lot for Jesus. And again, John uses these elements very astutely. Jesus will say and proclaim before this part of the passage, I am the resurrection and the life, which means he is both bios life and resurrection Zoe life. He has come to bring us eternal life, because you in this world can have both. And so they, at the time, are at this cultural crossroads between these two worldviews. Jesus comes into the fullness of his ministry in a very perilous political time, a time of transition and change. And we know change is scary, right? In fact, change for some of us is its own kind of trauma. Can I get an amen? Right? So Jesus is living in this difficult, turbulent time when empires were bolstered by religious zealotry and coercion. Again, I like to say, imagine it. Imagine it, if you will, right? Where the stuff of life mattered more than anything else, bios. And where Jesus was lifting up and speaking about a life that was more than just this terminal short moment. And we get a glimpse of this life through Jesus and this story when he says, Lazarus, come out, right? Lazarus, come out. I call you by name. And for those of us who are transgender siblings this day, I often think of this passage when I meet you and you share with me the new name that you are calling yourself. And I believe that God looks at you and says, Lazarus, come out. Your new name is calling. Your new self is calling. The God who created you is calling you out. Leave everything else behind. And then what does Jesus say? Unbind him, right? The community is involved in this. Take apart that which was put together to keep him dead. Unbind him, free him. And if you noticed, in the scripture, there are two responses to this from the community. Did you notice that? There was one response, belief, right? People said, oh, I believe now, I get it, right? And they help him and they surround Lazarus like a family circle and they get in the midst of it and they understand who Christ is, right? They're thinking forwards to all the ways in which resurrection life has impact and power in their lives this day. But number two, you get a second response at the very end. Did you note that? One of fear, where people went and tattled to the authorities, right? They wanted the status quo. They wanted to keep everything the same. They didn't want anything to change. They didn't want this Jesus who came to speak against the powers and principalities. They didn't want him to have his say, and so they tattled to the authorities. Two responses, I think, sum up so much of human history, don't you think? Those two responses to newness and change and resurrection and new life and revelation. The bios, there is only this life and we have to lean into the power and coercion and get all we can now at the expense of other people, at the expense of the oppressed. This is called empire life, where we cling to the perceived scarcity of resources and the world that wants us to buy into, and it's fear over faith. It's all about me. Or the second response is to lean into Zoe life, where there is more than this life, but there's also this life where we care about other people, where we care about love more than stuff, right? Where we don't need to fear or live in scarcity or try to get ours by cozying up to abusive power. Zoe life is the life that is real life in the midst of all of this, where holy hope reigns. And where everyone is seen as an image bearer of God. I don't need to put anyone down in Zoe life in order to be lifted up by my God. And Jesus' whole ministry, I believe, is bringing about Zoe life, bringing about the life that's really life in the midst of all the difficulties and struggles. The big life that you think happens maybe later or only happens to the elite or powerful. The big life that happens now to each and every one of us. The kingdom or the queendom of heaven, what does Jesus say? Is here, is now, and later. The realm of God's glory is present in the midst of you. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Do you understand it? It is here right now. And one of the indications that life is being lived out beautifully in the community, as you walk along life's paths, you will see, what can you imagine? Family circles. I can see them now. People in their pews who call one another when they're not present this day. People in small groups. People who lead ministries. And if someone doesn't show up, they call and ask how they're doing. We are made up of healing, loving, life-giving family circles. Not of trees, but of people who surround, protect, and care for, and make safe spaces for those who are oppressed and those who have experienced trauma and pain or difficulty. And as you know, today we are lifting up our transgender siblings, as it is Transgender Awareness Week. In fact, it is the 20th anniversary of TDOR, which is Transgender Day of Remembrance, where the community gets together to rally around, to mourn, to liberate, to love on those who struggle in our midst and grieve alongside them. And as we know, wherever trauma is at the foundation and the root, new life is able to grow. And so we seek to be a community of family circles this day, surrounding our beautiful and bold transgender siblings as they mourn and as they live their Zoe life to the fullest each and every day. May we be emboldened with them. May we be inspired by the fact that they were possibly in their own version of a tomb, and when Jesus said, "Come out," they came out. Are you out of the tomb? Are you out? Have you been called by name? I know you have. Come out and be who God has called you to be in this beautiful community. And I want you to be someone who surrounds themselves with Zoe life, lives to the fullest each and every day, the life that is truly life that cares about this world, but doesn't respond only in the way this world does, right? Life that springs from trauma that protects other people. Life that springs from grief has greater empathy, right? On Wednesday at Pulse, we focused on being grateful, and I shared that there are two postures or responses that we face when there is trauma or change or difficulty, right? There's two ways we can respond. In belief, right? Like the first disciples did. When something crazy happened in their midst, resurrection, they embraced it and they said, "We got you, Lazarus. We'll unbind you. We'll hold you up. You are a part of our community," right? Or you can close off a little bit, right? You can close off and say, "I don't know about this. I think I'm going to keep mine. I think I'm going to keep the stuff I have. I keep on to worry about some of the things that the world tells me to worry about," right? You can be open or you can be closed. And the God of life is calling you to live life that is really life. Life that goes beyond just ourselves and our stuff, that opens itself up to the beautiful possibility that resurrection is all around us. Resurrection is true and real and in each of our hearts because we have been raised with Christ, it says. We have been raised with Christ, it says. We are people of the resurrection. And my beautiful, beautiful community, my beautiful, beautiful friends, my hope is that you spring your arms open wide and you encircle others with your love and care, that you live the life that is really life, Zoe life, that you bring that new life with you wherever you go, changing and challenging this world for the better, and create a beautiful, beloved family circle. May it be so. Amen.